All right, Andrew.
Hello.
Let's talk about Jesus, huh?
Oh man, I'm very fond of Jesus.
Are you are?
I don't know about you, but I'm not an official Christian. And I wouldn't ever dare
And you're not baptized?
no, well, maybe. I don't know. We're kind of Anglican, and Anglican is like atheist Christianity. We're like Anglican is the most un-Christian Christianity, I would say.
Oh well.
The Church of England, right? It began with a bunch of beheadings and of Henry VIII's wives.
Yeah. My
But I,
grandpa
but
was a
I,
priest.
but I, and my mom took me to. She was like, oh, this he's not going to get a religious education, so she took me around to all kinds of different churches, and
Yeah.
I couldn't find any that I liked. So eventually, I became a Zen Buddhist in my 20s,
Okay.
and now I'm a tantric Buddhist. I still love I still love exploring the Christian and Jewish mythopoetic traditions,
Sure.
and I still think Jesus is cool. But what about you?
Well, my grandfather was a priest,
Ah,
and so
that's why you're such a pagan heretic.
well, I mean, my grandfather was a priest. My father was a doctor, and so I have like both sides. I don't know.
You
In,
mean
in
the radical spiritual and the
yeah, but the
clinical
thing is, my
medical?
grandfather died. I don't know if I told the story before. He died, I think, like 1992, 1993, something like that. And
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in the belief that he was a priest because where I grew up in the northern part of Germany, he was kind of famous. He had like this huge congregations, and like every Easter,
Oh
he
wow.
would there was like a big forest where we grew up, and in the center there
Mm-hmm.
was like a stage, and every Easter he would go there, and thousands and thousands of people were coming in and listening to his sermon, basically. And
Interesting.
then he died, and suddenly the military showed up, and so it's like that was like, yeah, the military gave him like a proper burial, and to his to
Mm-hmm.
his to his burial, all the again, thousands and thousands of people came. And I grew up again in the belief he will always have been a priest, because he had always, like, he was a big man with this gravitas, and you had to be silent and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like 3 years ago, I kind of Googled him. I don't know why, out of a whim, basically. And then all these websites, like clack, 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 came up, which basically said that he was like a hardcore Nazi because
Wow.
because he went to the Wehrmacht in 1933,
Mm-hmm.
stayed there till he invaded, basically, France 39. Just right after that, he went to the Eastern Front for 4 years or even 5 years, and was part of all the major battles there. And so he got all these, the Iron Cross and whatever. And then the war was over,
Mm-hmm.
and then he just went home, became a priest because something like psychotherapy or psychology wasn't yet available to him to deal with all the trauma, I guess.
Of
Because, like, if you
war.
stay
Oh.
like for 4 years in the Eastern Front killing people with your shovel, I think that's what you do. You become a priest. And so he met his wife, and my mother was born like 3 years later. And so, or 4 years.
He found Jesus.
He found,
But
yeah, yeah,
but did
yeah.
any was there any repercussions of his being in a Nazi soldier later on? Like,
Not to my knowledge. No, no.
when you say he was a hardcore Nazi, he was a soldier, which is kind of like.
No, no. He was I don't know his rank, but he was like an officer. I don't know what he was.
I see, an officer.
Lieutenant or major. I don't know what exactly he was, but he was like on the ground forces. But there was no. He just went home, and nobody talked about this in my youth. So I was like kind of shocked when I found out. But he found Jesus, I think. and
Wow,
and
interesting.
yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, well, and so
Well, my grandfather was probably trying to bomb the hell out of your grandfather. He was on a bombing route, and he got malaria in India,
yeah,
and went down into the hospital, and his whole crew was shot down while he was in hospital.
yeah.
So I can thank my existence for the mosquito that bit him
Oh, wow.
and gave him malaria.
That's so interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like, it's like the butterfly effect. It's the mosquito effect.
The mosquito effect. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, imagine, what we're doing with Parallax, and a
So
a mosquito is responsible partly for that.
yeah, exactly. So I was talking to my wife yesterday, and do you have this expression "Good Friday"? That was yesterday, Good Friday,
Uh-huh.
wasn't it?
Yeah, yesterday was Friday, yes.
Yesterday was Good Friday, I think, which means that Jesus was crucified, and then tomorrow is Easter, and it's Easter Sunday. Like, I'm ignorant about these things.
Yeah, I think so, yes.
But then why is it Good Friday if Jesus was crucified? It doesn't seem to be very good that he was crucified.
I don't know what the German expression is. Good Friday. It doesn't ring a bell.
Because we say Good Friday. I guess because his crucifixion was redeeming humanity, and that would make it good. But it's still strange to have it be called Good Friday.
I mean, the whole thing is strange, that the symbol that we are all preaching to, and that is so imminent in our culture, as a dead guy on the cross. That's so weird if you think about that.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, I guess the Eastern symbols are a little more tame. A guy sitting under a tree.
Yeah.
It's not so not so dramatic.
Yeah, it's integration of death in a way, no?
Of course. Yeah. 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 And well, even Illich always said the corruption of the best is the worst. So I always thought that, like, okay, so there's Christianity at its best can be sort of like, this is the crucifixion of the ego,
Right.
Which is the ultimate spiritual sort of sacrifice. And there is, that's very profound, but then there's, at its worst, it worships death.
Mm-hmm.
And also the fact that Jesus was the perfect man, and the incarnate God, and all this kind of thing. Carl Jung had this interesting point that if you have the perfect man, the incarnate God, then with the creation of Christ comes the Antichrist.
Right.
Comes its opposite. So so Christianity has a heavy it has a very heavy and confusing kind of history, I think.
I think what's still so interesting on that whole thing is because I was thinking about, again, our little ecosystem, and with that I mean, us and the store, and I mean, Rebel Wilson is a little bit bigger, but the intellectual deep web, this kind of ecosystem which exists at the margins of society, which is like, let's, for lack of a better word, just call it like an avant-garde or something, like a subsystem of society. It's not mainstream. And so so there are two things, and we already talked about this. So there's a discourse going on that's like the intra conversation between the communications between the different tribes of that subsystem, that tribe, these things. But then it's also like, and I was thinking about this, why do we do that? And it's because we're trying to find the right combination, let's say the right archetype that is able to be transferred from that subsystem into the mainstream. And so, because I always think that happens, always, you have like, let's say you have like internet and the scene of comedians, and suddenly the kind of perfect archetype pops out and transformed and gets integrated into mainstream. And then everybody else is kind of replicating and copying that kind of way. Like, just think of Louis C.K. like 10, 15 years ago. He was like the first big internet comedian that entered, you know, mainstream from a subsystem, you know. And so I was thinking, okay, so let's think about Jesus in that kind of way, because you have to think it was not just Jesus and the 12 what is it,
apostles.
Yeah, so that had to be like a bigger subset of that society back then, a new kind of thinking. And he, as the perfect archetype to enter the mainstream back then and transforming everything.
Well, people forget that his name was Rabbi Jeshua, and that he comes from a rabbinical tradition, and you know, and he was a student of John the Baptist, and
yeah, but it was not mainstream. He had a new teaching. That's the point.
Yes,
you know, so he came from the outset, from the margins of society, was accepted as the perfect archetype, and had a new teaching. And that happens all the time. It happens, you know, when you know, in comedy, or that's what we are in our society, in our, you know, little, you know,
sure.
What we are looking for the right guy, basically, that is such an encapsulation of meta-modern, postmodern integral thought, not just thought, also heart and action.
So do you think a prophet will emerge?
No, it's like it's like
from our world, from,
I think,
like, all these people we know. And then, I mean, some people are kind of like, you know, very intelligent galaxy brain types.
Yeah, no, prophet is such a loaded word. But like just a perfect encapsulation of the values that we have, right? And that will and that what we're looking for, so that person can distribute that values within the mainstream, and that is like, I think that's the unconscious urge that we all have. It's not just the dialogue within the tribes. It's like, okay, we're looking for somebody who can transform the mainstream, because then our work has kind of a more global or a bigger.
But as soon as that person enters the mainstream, they lose their vitality, almost usually. I mean, I was just thinking of, not always, but how many artists preserve their mentality when they are crowned, let's say, the heroes of the culture.
I completely agree. Yes, but we again in the realm of Christianity, because what happens is a crucifixion.
They get crucified.
The death of libido.
Yeah.
And then the next step would be the awakening, you know, of the true artist. Let's say the artist who invents himself, like, let's say, David Bowie, you know, because he entered the mainstream, he was copied, but he had the kind of eerie quality just to...
He was of the world, in the world, but not of the world.
Right.
In a sense, he never, because the real prophet actually is from somewhere else.
Right.
He doesn't belong there.
Right.
There's something uncanny about him. He just does not belong in the mainstream. He always, you know, so it's almost a fluke when he arrives there or something.
Yeah, but David Bowie, wouldn't you agree that David Bowie was kind of the perfect encapsulation of what
Yes, because David Bowie he you know, it's like his song Fashion. He was ahead of the curve all the time. So he was never he was making the curve, right?
Right.
So he was always ahead of the curve. So he was not of his time. He was of the future in a way, you know. That's why it's prophecy, because the prophet knows the future. So he's ahead of the horizon point.
It's like, it's so weird when you listen to his live rendition of his famous songs. They always have a tilt, you know, they always have a bend. He always performs them in a way that's completely unexpected, you know. And so he has like all these transformations, and I think he you know, viewed through a lens of Christianity, he was exactly, you know, an image or a replication, or like a embodiment of the Jesus myth, basically. And I think that's interesting, because then he's able to transform mainstream, like
Because he's able to
profoundly.
die. He's able to die to himself and become something else.
Right.
And do that several times. He's able to.
Even his last album, Black Star. Have you heard that?
Of course, and that's almost like that's like an enactment of his own crucifixion. Like,
yeah, but it's amazing. It's one of his best albums.
Yeah, sure it is. Yeah.
So, but again, and so I think like what we're doing in our little ecosystem of postmodern thought and metamodern thought, it's just we're looking unconsciously. We're not just having discourse because because we're kind of repeating the ideas that are already within that system. What we're also trying to do is like we're looking for somebody who is
looking for Jesus.
Yeah, like an embodiment of somebody who embodies our values to enter mainstream. And I think that's so interesting because that's what we should do also. We should enforce that search and look for people who can do that. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I'm wondering, if it's necessary to enter the mainstream. You could never enter the mainstream and still have a hidden influence. In other words, that as a goal seems to be a dangerous goal, because then you become the Antichrist if you enter the mainstream, right?
Completely.
You become the Mephistophelies, or whereas Christ says, "Give whatever to Rome," and Christ enters the mainstream not by the laws of the mainstream. So that's the interesting thing.
Yeah,
that's the interesting paradox, is you can't enter the mainstream through the mainstream or in that way, or you can't affect this sort of transformational change which a cultural moment or a cultural being does, but using the laws of that particular world.
Yes, and furthermore, you can't do it on purpose, because that's what Joseph Campbell said. The monomyth. Exactly. The first thing has to be a rejection of that offering to go into mainstream. It's like, okay, so you are great, you have to do, this is your task. And so the hero, may it be Neo or whatever, says, no, I don't want to do that. Leave me alone. I don't want to enter mainstream. Because that is the ultimate proof. So because if he wants
or the devil offers Jesus something in the desert and he says, no, I'm not, I don't want that.
Right. Because then his motivation is clear.
Then his motivation is exactly is clear.
And so if you can't do it voluntarily, it's like you have to do it voluntarily, but on the other side, not voluntarily. You have to be forced out of your cave by powers that are greater than you. No?
Yeah. It has to come from inspiration, or it's not well, it's question of will to power, right? You write about will and transcendence, and I think we do have to develop a strong will,
right?
But I think that the will comes from somewhere else when we really doesn't come from us,
right?
The will to it's like what Gurdjieff says, it's like you make an extraordinary effort or something, but that's to almost deconstruct the self, so that the capital self, the Atman, or the can emerge.
Yeah, exactly. And so, because we all want to, what's the English word? We all want to have like an influence. Let's say the ego wants to have like an influence.
Yes, of course. Yes.
Efficacy is the word, no?
Yeah, and we always have to check that all the time because we have that, right?
Right. And so as soon as you notice that you're striving for efficacy and you're striving for, for recognition, maybe you should put yourself on the cross.
Yeah. And you notice that something is being corrupted within you,
right?
and confess that, and there's this, oh, this is very
And
intelligent
that,
in the
and yeah,
Christian religion, right?
and
It's
that's the will to transcendence to do that,
like,
but you can't will yourself into mainstream or into efficacies. You can't.
Yeah, yeah. I was listening to Rick Rubin. Do you know who he is?
Yeah, of course.
I was listening to an amazing interview with him, and this guy, I think his name was Lex
Friedman. Yeah.
Friedman. A very, very wonderful interview. And Lex is he's bringing up all of these classic songs and how they were created, and what did you do? And Rick Rubin's response was kind of like, it's nothing I did, or it's nothing that was, it just was, I just created an atmosphere for that to emerge. And then, like the Johnny Cash song Hurt, which is a massive song on some level. It's this old man singing, his last song in a way. And I'm confessing his hubris.
Yeah.
And it's this most beautiful song. And it's after Johnny Cash is almost like he's half paralyzed and his voice is half broken, and he sings this very pure song. And so how did that happen? He didn't know. He didn't plan it. It wasn't constructed in any way. He just sort of was good at creating an intimate space for the musicians to feel naked.
Oh, wow.
Fully. That's what Rick Rubin kind of was really good at doing, and simplifying things down to their bare essentials. So and he was talking about, I can't remember the song when this great song kind of emerged in his studio, and the guys were like, and then he was just like, what's next? We did this, and then he was like, moved on right to the next thing. It's like, okay, let's do the next one.
Wow.
He was aware that something really, heaven and earth had opened up, and something had been created of importance and beauty. But he said, let's go on to the next one, because we can never proclaim the authorship of that. And once we start to do that, that's when the corruption comes in, I think. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I saw a snippet of that interview. I will give it a watch, because like Rick Rubin is so interesting. Did you see that McCartney thing with this 3-hour McCartney thing?
And he was talking about that and how he did that. And what he did was he tried to make all the microphones invisible, and create this dark room. Everybody wore black and walked in, slippers. And so that he could be totally unaware that there was a camera, or that there was a microphone, or that he wanted to reduce it down to just the most simple conversation between two people. Which is kind of interesting, because it's kind of like what we try to do in our podcast and my anyway, but I think Rick Rubin really is a genius of bringing out that in people.
That was an amazing documentary,
Yeah, sure.
Just because, the simplicity and, the intimacy of that whole thing. Exactly. And I mean, and his love of music, it's like, that's above all, he's just so, he's just it's like he has like this childlike quality that he,
a childlike quality, and this and a real, he can kind of, again, maybe that's something what real genius is a childlike quality, and yet an incredible insight at the same time into the moment.
I think that would be my problem with Christianity, because it's all super ego, in the Freudian sense. Do this, don't do that, right?
Yeah.
What's with the child? It's like there's no glorification of the openness and the genius of the child.
Well, isn't the baby Jesus? Isn't that the point of that? In a sense.
No, that's just baby Jesus in a crib. You don't know what happened between 6 months then and his 30th year of age. What happened, and so the myth. But
I think Christianity kind of worships innocence. That's another dark side of Christianity at times.
Does it though?
But you're
But like
talking about the
but from
law. You're
yeah,
talking about the law, but that's in the Jewish religion, there's they talk about the Torah, and then they talk about the Torah being a punishment because people couldn't hear the word of God directly. So all these rules and laws were because people were not ready. Well, that's kind of interesting, I thought. And so the what is it, the secret Torah, or is the Torah where you speak to God directly, and I think Christianity, the oral Torah rather than the written Torah. And so I heard one rabbi say Jesus was a teacher of the oral Torah. He just opened the whole thing up, but that was extremely dangerous because people are not ready for that, and that's why Christianity has such a dark side. Almost the opposite of what you're saying, because it tries to throw away all the rules, and then it brings them back.
I mean, maybe my conception of Christianity is tainted by going back to the gravitas of my grandfather.
Yeah.
But from my point of view, it's all morals and ethics and how you should behave.
Yeah.
And there is, I mean, inbuilt, of course, wisdom in that. Otherwise, it wouldn't have lasted that long. But at the same time, it's what we are worshiping is a dead guy on the cross. We're not worshiping the God as a child, because I mean not the literal child. I mean God as child. That's what we're talking about. Rick Rubin, the openness, the joy, and the infinite joy, let's say, of what a child can have, and the wisdom that is, which is in there. The openness to experience, to the creativity, all that stuff that is necessary if you have to be like let's say David Bowie, an artist, that openness to that inner child that you have, which enriches and enlivens existence. Because if you're just on the Christian side of things with all the morals and the superego, you have to do this, don't do that, then the image is of death and of the woman, which is dressed
the
in
covered
black.
woman. Yeah, the woman.
And so what is?
Yeah, well, I remember D.H. Lawrence saying that we this is Easter, right? That the Christians often are obsessed with the crucifixion, but forget about the resurrection.
Right, and so you need, where's the joy in it? Where is the woman as the happy harlot? As the strong woman that is so in contact with her body and her inner self and her desires and her strength, and who's not like dressed in black, but dressed in red, let's say.
Yes.
And because
again, that is the repression that Christianity brought. It doesn't have that side. It doesn't have the tantric side to it. But I think it does, maybe in esoteric circles, and that you could find it if you looked for it. But in terms of its outward manifestation,
yeah, no, exactly,
it's gone. But then again, like I think David Bowie, and I find that I was thinking about this actually, because I often have a hard time with Christian moralism and Christians, and I fight with that, like when I'm with them, and I feel like, oh God, they're going to try to convert me or something, and they think I'm a pagan, and they want to bring the universal history, and they always want to convert you and hang you up on the cross with them or something. It's like, no, thank you. I'm not buying. Jehovah's Witnesses come to your house, and then, they call you a sinner and a pagan, but at the same time, I'm very influenced by Christianity. I'm extremely, and I think David Bowie was as well, and I think the whole entire culture is. But the outsider Christianity, and even the Christian thinkers that I love the most are always sort of on the outside of Christianity, like Ivan Illich or Northrop Frye or Marshall McLuhan's. They're always kind of oddball outsider Christians that are the more interesting Christians. So Christianity in the center is very interesting, but on the edges, in the center is very uninteresting, but on the edges is very interesting. That's how I see it anyway. I mean,
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of, I think if you look at Jesus and the disciples and this whole stories of that was a very tantric situation, which became very corrupted over time.
Maybe they were all gay.
Well, there is some serious scholarship.
There's a series from Seth Rogen, the preacher.
There's a serious scholarship about I think it was Jesus and John, being lovers and things like, so why not? Who cares? I mean, and also the fact that Jesus never had sex, really. Come on, I mean, Mary Magdalene, and he spent a lot of time with the whores. If you look at the tantric masters who realized that they were always, I mean, why this heavy moralism? Why these strict laws, and why all this heavy-handed stuff?
There's an interesting series. It's called The Preacher, and it plays with these themes, because it always goes back to time and time when Jesus lived, and so he was like different. But the point that you were making, and I want to expound on that, because so we're so embedded in Christianity, and when you read Max Weber, and the sociologist, so our conceptions of work, let's say, because you could say don't do this, don't do that, the Christian values don't apply to us anymore, but our conceptions of workday, of working, and of having relationships, that's so inherently Christian. You have to have a job, you have to work 8 hours, Sunday's your free day, that's Protestantism in its core, like if you follow Max Weber. And so I'm coming to the point now, like in opposition to this, what I mean with the myth and the glory of God as child, right? What I mean with this is like, okay, so you have the Christian doctrine of, let's say, work, and you can go for 40 years, 50 years, your job, 9-to-5 job. It's like you don't really need to love it, but you get some money, you're safe, and you don't have to think about this anymore. Or you take responsibility and say, okay, no, I do it my way. You have the creative and, let's say, phallic energy to not follow that Christian path, but to say, okay, what are your true capacities? What are your true desires? What do you do? What do you want to do in this world? And find a way to do it, even if it doesn't pay off in the beginning that much. But the payment is that you're doing it, and that you have, this childlike fascination with will and going your way in the world, and so that's a different kind of myth. Well, you know what I'm saying? It's like you can as an example.
Well, when you say worship the child as God, it sounds very Christian.
No, God as child, not God as child as God.
That sounds very Christian to me. So that's why I'm kind of struggling with what you're saying.
I don't mean child as God. I mean God as child.
Like you have to be a child to enter the kingdom of heaven, and all these sort of things that Jesus was saying.
No, I'm talking about the image. The image of Christianity is either of a dead man on the cross, or of a black dressed woman, right? These are the two core images.
Yeah.
But what about
Krishna, the Krishna child who was dancing in the forest and playing his flute with all the gopis around him, and like something like that, like this extremely ecstatic, life positive vision
or let's say in Egyptian mythology, you have Horus as a child.
Okay.
Right. And so you have like this dual nature of him, because he is, at one side he's like a warrior-like god, but then you have this manifestation of him, because like he has like this manifestation in relationship to the sun, right? And so then he appears also as a child.
Well, I the part of child that I think you're saying is a sort of infinite energy
Right, exactly. Infinite libido.
Of creativity, not this crucifixion.
No, infinite
Yeah.
joy, infinite
You just
eros,
keep going
infinite
even
libido.
after death,
Yes, it's a sun coming up,
Yeah.
the eternal rising sun, the eternal, that it's called in Egyptian, it's Hirupakrat or something. So you have like this infinite joy and infinite libido. It's like, because that is what a child has. It's like, have you seen the videos? I think like one scientist put like a video, like cameras inside a house, and just observe the kind of movements a baby does in the course of one day, and just like walking around, on all fours. And
I have a 2-year-old, so
yeah, and it's like the energy they have. It's bonkers.
Yeah.
And so I'm
and
talking
then
about.
and then as you grow up, that gets kind of reduced and kind of like yeah. But there's only rare people who can keep that.
Yeah, and I'm talking, when I'm saying God as child, I'm talking about that aspect of evolution, because a child has to have that kind of energy, or like a 16-year-old has to have like a hard-on every 2 minutes, because that's evolution.
Yeah,
right.
Well, you say evolution and you say 6. That's interesting because all the tantric deities are 16.
Right.
They're all 16 years old, and they're eternal. That is the symbol, and it is a kind of symbol of eternal youthfulness. It's not an old man sitting on a grumpy old man. It's this symbol of infinite energy.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Yes.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean with God as child, evolution as child, evolution as a adolescent.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
And so because you said like because the other image of Christianity is that obviously of an old man on his throne. It's like, where's the energy in that? There's no libido in that. There's no libido in the dead man. There's no libido in the woman dressed in black, and there's no libido in the old man on the throne. It's like, okay, so that's
maybe it's imbalanced because we do have to deal with the death side, right? Like in the tantric imagery, in one hand, he holds a trident, which is trident is passion, aggression. No, there's always a skull. There's always skulls, as part of the tantric imagery, but they're also contrasted with this, splendorous, beautiful naked bodies, and so you have this contrast. You have both. I think you need both.
Yeah, no, exactly. I completely agree.
Not just, but I guess I think the Christianity dies itself. It's like the Christian myth is like it dies, like Jesus dies on the cross. It becomes more morose and morbid and deathly because it doesn't resurrect itself.
I think that's the key to understand why Nietzsche glorified himself as a living Dionysus. When especially like if you read his crazy notes, it's like and the reports of what he was like doing before his stage of darkness, let's say, but when he was like celebrating his being, the Dionysian child of youth and energy, and because he was the antipode
he self-consciously put himself up as the Antichrist, didn't he? He was like, I'm again,
not as the Antichrist, no, as Dionysius.
As Dionysius, yes. But he did at the end of his life, he said, I am the, didn't he praise the Antichrist on some level?
There's a book of, that's true. Yes.
He called it, there's a book called The Antichrist, and then right at the end of his life, he proclaimed himself as being the crucified one. Interesting that he kind of, his strong reaction to Christianity sort of turned him into a Christian sacrifice at the same time. That like, because I think there was
that's the paradox we all have to deal with. That's so instructive what you just said.
Like I don't think one of this, who was it? Walter Kaufman was saying that he kind of embodies Protestantism on some level, because it's
that you what? I
it's,
didn't get that.
Protestantism. It's a protest against, rather than, because the child is not the Antichrist. He's not protesting against.
No.
Right. He's. I mean, this infinite energy is not for or against.
Okay, so are you familiar with Eric Berne's theory of transactional analysis?
A little bit, but not.
And so he was a disciple of Freud, and so he had like this idea that you have like the super ego, you have the ego, and you have the kid, inside of you, not the it, but he calls it the child, and so transactional analysis starts when you think about what happens if the super ego talks with the ego, or the super ego talks to the child, and so, but the point is that he differentiated between different types of childlike its, right? And so you have 4 types, and so you have the conform childlike, you have the non-conform childlike. Okay, that's like a conform one is like the child that doesn't break the rules and says yes to everything. Yes, I will do this. Papa, Mama, I will do that. The non-conform one is child as, let's say, the punk, that one. So okay, so then
breaks everything. Yeah.
Okay, then there are two other manifestations, and the one is like the accepted. Now, what is the English translation? What would be that? The accepted free child. So that is a child that acts outside of the boundaries of social norms, but is accepted from society for that. And so these kind of kids from your youth that were not like this anti thing, and they were like not conform, but they were kind of free. They were kind of doing their thing, and they were like, and then the duality of that, the antipode of that is the free kid that is not accepted for being free. And so this kind of kid is always like kind of struggling with his role in society. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
And so he differentiated between 4 types of its, or 4 types of, inner childs, let's say. And I found that very interesting, because now I've lost the mic.
Well, I read this great book by Marie-Louise von Franz called Per Ateris, and it was about The Little Prince. I wrote an article about that.
Yeah.
And there's these 2 poles that she describes. Is the Per Ateris, I don't know how I'm saying that right. It's the Latin word that means golden boy.
Yeah.
And then there's the Senex, and the Senex is the bitter old angry man.
Right.
And throughout life, we navigate, this death and life business, right? Kronos eats his children in the end, right? Kronos is the Senex, I think. I don't know if I'm confusing mythologies here, but there was something about Kronos as well, being the old man that devours its children. And but so she described The Little Prince, this book, this famous book. And The Little Prince it's a bit like Peter Pan, right? He's the Peter Pan character, and he sort of hates society. He hates the world of the adult world, and so he kind of gets stuck. So I guess the idea is that we have to keep this Per Ateris. We have to keep the golden child without him committing suicide on some level, which is what sort of Saint Exupery, died in a plane crash. He was too close to his mother, and he had this very intense childlike creative aspect, but he didn't move into the adult world fully. He didn't make that sacrifice. But the trick is, how do we make that sacrifice and move into the adult world fully without losing that energy? and
Right.
becoming the bitter old senex, the bitter old,
Yeah,
dried
well,
up old person.
yeah, well, yeah, finish.
Yeah, I think that's the point. But again, and I would think there's some artists who are very, Picasso kind of maintained that in his older, that state of creativity in his older age, and others who can do that, but most people, can't.
Yeah, well, the beauty of that model of the structural model of Eric Berne is that you always carry like a super ego, like a parent voice, like a rational voice, and a childlike voice, you always carry it with you. But he just says, okay, there are like 4 different child voices that you can have, either conform, non-conform, accepted free, or not accepted free. And I think that what we are talking about in terms of, I don't think you could overlay the golden boy, the Peter Pan figure with the accepted free one, because the accepted free one is somebody like Picasso or David Bowie
Who can do both.
who are always free, who always will be free, and who will always be accepted by society because,
and they're not haunted by that voice. They're not one of those, they're not the tortured artist.
No,
exactly. The free artist. The tortured artist is the one that is, always fighting against the superego to maintain that.
No. What I mean, what Eric Berne means is that if you say, like, let's say Van Gogh, right? He is a free inner child, but he's not accepted for that. And that's where the fight comes. But he doesn't fight against, because if he would be just a non-conform kid, right? He is free.
But he's tormented by those voices.
No, he's tormented because he's not accepted.
Yes.
For his freedom.
Yes.
But he's not reacting against society because he's free.
Yes. Okay. Got it. Yeah.
So because the child that is reacting against society, that's the punk that says "fuck you." That's the non-conform kid.
That's the non-conform kid.
And so Van Gogh would be
that's an interesting difference there. Yeah.
And so it's like, these are the difference between Van Gogh and Picasso, let's say, for example.
Yeah.
And like Nietzsche, for example, he was also not accepted, but he was in his childlike being, he was free.
Yeah, and they're the tragic figures too,
right.
Aren't they? They're always the tragic figures,
right?
They always have, like Rimbaud or something, they always have this like tragic life, right?
Jim Morrison, because he was like, he was really free, but he was kind of accepted, but he wasn't. He had all the trials pending, and newspaper. Yeah, I don't know. He was of course he was eaten up by this. He was a sacrifice. Yeah, and so it's like this. Or here's the Icarus going too close to the sun and something like that. Yeah. Have you ever read the White Album from John Didion? Little parts of it, but I know what you're referring to. I read parts of it. She's a very good writer. Yeah. I know. I just read yesterday that part about the Doors, which I found like super interesting. You remember that part? No. Because she was in the studio when the Doors, produced their 3rd album, I guess, and they didn't know. Everybody had their function there, but nothing really worked because Morrison wasn't there. It's like, and they were like, he was already kind of gone or something. No. He was just not. He was not physically there. Okay. He was partying and he wasn't there. So they were just like tweaking, the record, but it wasn't going forward. And then he was like coming in the studio, and she describes that nobody was reacting to his appearance and to his presence. And so he was just like sitting on the couch, and Raymond Zarek was like working with his organ, and Densmore, the drummer, was like doing something with his drum, and then Morrison was just sitting for an hour on the sofa. Nobody was talking, and then he said something like, "Yeah, maybe we should go in the desert." And then, and so that was like after an hour of non-communication, he was like, you know, he was like that guy that reminds me so much of Ragnar Lothbrok, you know, from Vikings. You know, it's just like the soft spoken, but you know, it's like a little bit. Have you seen Vikings?
Yeah, I remember that part. Yeah, I think I know what you mean. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
this kind of, you know, soft spoken, but then, you know, everybody listens to, you
Well, it
know.
reminds me also of a Thelonious Monk, and who he was like, he didn't talk very much.
Right.
But they said that every time that he said something, he kind of devastated the room, or
Right. Right.
it was everything he said was they said it's timing. He has this incredible sense of timing.
Right.
So he didn't have to say much. He didn't have to do the other things, the dramas that everybody else had to. He didn't have to play the social role. He just kind of he had this presence, and then, you know, he'd play the piano in this odd rhythmic way, and he would just, you know, when he would play, heaven and earth would open up. Right?
Yeah, but
You
there
know?
you have it, Andrew. There
Yeah,
you have it. It's
yeah.
like we're talking. You were just saying he wouldn't. What did you say? He wouldn't comply to societal norms.
No, yeah, exactly what you
No,
were
but
saying.
that's what we're talking about
He
here.
didn't have to, because he didn't need to do that.
And that's the free child.
That's
you know?
freedom.
That's
Yeah.
a free libidinal child
Yeah,
within
and
us.
that's very good. Yeah.
You know, and I think that's beautiful.
It is. It's incredible. Yeah. And yeah, and people like that, you know, often have a lot of power, but then, you know, they die young, or.
And that's the question. Why are like 20, like basically 29 years of the life of Jesus, why is that omitted from scripture? You know, that's so weird, because all the interesting stuff happens between 15 and, let's say, 27, 28. Because
Yeah.
27 is also, I think you mentioned that in one other episode, that 27 is one of those ages where there's a transformation from, you know, young man to older man. And that's why those artists like died.
They don't make they don't make it through.
So, but
Yeah.
why does the New Testament start basically with Jesus being 30 or 29 or how old?
33. It was crucified at 33, right? Oh, when does it start? Yeah.
No. He was old. He wasn't. Not with.
No, he was crucified at age 33. That was
Is that true? Is that the
33?
Bible? No.
Yeah, 33.
I thought.
Yeah.
I think it was. Are you sure?
No, it's 33, definitely. Because I remember the first line in Henry Miller's book. It's like, I just turned 33 the year that Jesus was crucified. I'm the happiest man alive, or something. I don't know if you remember that from, I think his book, Tropic of Cancer, or was it, you know, sexist? But 33 years old is the year.
Sorry, Andrew. Here, when I look it up in Google, it just says Jesus
age
died
33.
like with 30 or 33.
But the age that people usually say that he died is age 33. So that's a big.
No, 33, not 23.
I said 33. Yeah.
No, you said 23.
Oh no, I said 33.
Yeah. No, you said 23.
Oh, maybe one time 33.
I said. Okay, no,
okay,
then we're on par. No, so okay, with 30 or 33. So what happened in the 30 years between that?
Well, there's some Gnostic Gospels, and there's all kinds of stories that were taken out at the Council of Nicaea. Like, for example, apparently, I don't know if this is true, he killed somebody when he was a kid by accident. And there's all kinds of weird stories that you find in the Gnostic Gospels describing another kind of Jesus than the idealized version that we want to believe in.
Yeah, but isn't that interesting? That it's omitted from the Bible, what happened? Because again, that's the most interesting time.
Yeah.
You know, talking about, you know, Rimbaud and Jim Morrison, and you know, all that libidinal energy you have in that age. Why don't we know nothing about that? And this is like the strangest thing to me, that we, you know, that it's not.
Well, I think the whole point of the crucifixion is it's the most horrible thing that could happen to a person. Is like it happens in the prime of life. You know.
Sure. No, I get that. you know.
It's something that happens right in the prime of.
But why is it that the tantric traditions, as you said, have both images of death and youth, but the Christianity doesn't? Just Christianity is just about, you know, the dark side and death, and there's nothing about, you know.
Well, Christians would deny that, but I think there is a lack of joy in the imagery and in the
that's what I'm talking about.
Expression,
why,
sure.
Why?
Yeah,
why?
I mean, that's why you feel so depressed when you go in churches. There's this heavy, terrible, heavy feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah. But and I think that's right. I think that there needs that if Christianity is to be valuable in the future, the other side of that has to emerge,
right?
Especially, and also the feminine side of it. I mean, there's people who are talking about Mary Magdalene and things like that, and
yeah.
So I think it's there. I just think it's been buried in the sutra culture. I mean, I saw the same thing when I went about in Buddhism when I went to the Museum Gimli in Paris. All of the Buddhist statues, after a certain point in history, became very sterile, and they were just bodhisattvas. They're very pure, right?
All right.
The Buddha sitting under a tree, and Kuan Yin, and all these very pure images of the Buddha.
Yeah,
it was after the Muslim invasions, after Tantra was wiped out. Whereas the I think by the Muslim invasions, whereas before that, there was sexual imagery, there was the protectors with the skull cups, and it was like a transformation of the pagan energies. Both sides were represented, but I think society always sort of codifies everything and makes everything safe, and I'm sure the same thing is true in Christianity, in a way, that it's whitewashed.
Yeah. Well, no, but that happens. We talked.
So the sutra, because maybe, I don't know, maybe can a society be tantric, or does it always?
No, but you
you
answered your own question in the beginning of this episode when you said, as soon as some archetype or some new form enters mainstream, it loses all its libidinal forms.
Yes. Yeah. So it's always, how do we keep the Holy Spirit living?
We also answered this. Some big-breasted Norwegian horse.
We need a big-breasted Norwegian horse. Obviously, that's what we need. Thank you for reminding me, Tom. I sometimes forget. I get very serious, and then you bring me down to the basics. Essential, the things basically matter.
No, because again, Dawes, the notion, and John Didier talked about this, the notion that God is sex, and sex is life, and sex is death also, and these kinds of things you have to, as the motto of the Dawes, you have to contend with those things. Sex is not something that is brutish or raw. It's like there's God in there, and because what Christianity did was to kind of make sex a brutish thing. But I think the tantric, traditions have a completely different notion of what sexuality is basically, because
a much more relaxed notion.
Yeah, because it's not sex is not part of the desert of the real. Sex is the joyful place of the gods if you do it correctly, and that's something else completely.
Yep. Agree with that.
All right, Andrew.
So we did our Christian sermon for
yeah. Go fucking people. Go fuck.
Yes.
Go. Yes.
Well, I don't know. William Blake, for example, was a guy who understood that.
Right, that's true.
He's I was thinking about Tantra and Christianity, and I think if we have one exemplar of Christian Tantra, that would be William Blake. So
that's interesting. Yeah.
He's an absolute massive figure as far as I'm concerned. Because he was all about that. what you were talking about, infinite energy and
Yeah.